The Lord saith, because the daughters of Zion are a haughty, and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, and making a tinkling with their feet, therefore the Lord will smite with his scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will discover their secret parts. 2 Nephi 13:26. And her agates shall lament and be mourned, and she shall be desolate, and shall sit upon the ground. 2 Nephi 14:4. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from the midst thereof by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. 2 Nephi 15:14. Therefore, hell hath enlarged herself, and opened her mouth without measure, and their glory, and their multitude, and their pomp, and he that rejoiceth, shall descend into it. Alma 19:9. And Ammon said unto her, believest thou this? And she said unto him, I have had no witness save thy word, and the word of our servants, nevertheless I believe that it shall be according as thou hast said. Alma 30:18. And thus he did preach unto them, leading away the hearts of many, causing them to lift up their heads in their wickedness, yea, leading away many women, and also men, to commit whoredoms, telling them that when a man was dead, that was the end thereof. Moroni 9:7-10. And now I write somewhat concerning the sufferings of this people. For according to the knowledge which I have received from Amram, behold, the Lamanites have many prisoners, which they took from the tower of Sherizah, and there were men, women, and children. And the husbands and fathers of those women and children they have slain, and they feed the women upon the flesh of their husbands, and the children upon the flesh of their fathers, and no water, save a little, do they give unto them. And notwithstanding this great abomination of the Lamanites, it doth not exceed that of our people in Moriandum. For behold, many of the daughters of the Lamanites have they taken prisoners, and after depriving them of that which was most dear and precious above all things, which is chastity and virtue, and after they had done this thing, they did murder them in a most cruel manner, torturing their bodies even unto death, and after they have done this, they devour their flesh like unto wild beasts, because of the hardness of their hearts, and they do it for a token of bravery. Mosiah 12:29. And again he said unto them, if ye teach the law of Moses, why do ye not keep it? Why do ye set your hearts upon breaches? Why do ye commit whoredoms and expend your strength with harlots, and cause this people to commit sin, that the Lord has caused to send me to prophesy against this people, even a great evil against this people? Alma 39:3. And this is not all, my son. Thou didst do that which was grievous unto me, for thou didst forsake the ministry, and did go over into the land of Saran among the borders of the Lamanites, after the harlot Isabel. Alma 19:15-16. Now, when the servants of the king had seen that they had fallen, they also began to cry unto God, for the fear of the Lord had come upon them also, for it was Aphi who had stood before the king and testified unto him concerning the great power of Ammon. And it came to pass that they did call on the name of the Lord, in their might, even until they had all fallen to the earth, save it were one of the Lamanitish women, whose name was Abish, she having been converted unto the Lord for many years, on account of a remarkable vision of her father. Alma 50:30. And behold, they would have carried this plan into effect, which would have been a cause to have been lamented, but behold, Morianton being a man of much passion, therefore he was angry with one of his maidservants, and he fell upon her and beat her much. 3 Nephi 21:16. And I will cut off all witchcrafts out of thy land, and thou shalt have no more soothsayers. Mormon 1:19. And it came to pass that there were sorceries, and witchcrafts, and magics, and the power of the evil one was wrought upon all the face of the land, even unto the fulfilling of all the words of Abinadi, and also be Samuel the Lamanite. Mormon 2:10. And it came to pass that the Nephites began to repent of their iniquity, and began to cry even as had been prophesied by Samuel the prophet, for behold no man could keep that which was his own, for the thieves, and the robbers, and the murderers, and the magic art, and the witchcraft which was in the land. Mosiah 20:1, 2, and 5. Now there was a place in Ashemlon where the daughters of the Lamanites did gather themselves together to sing, and to dance, and to make themselves merry. And it came to pass that there was one day a small number of them gathered together to sing and to dance. And when there were but few of them gathered together to dance, they came forth out of their secret places and took them and carried them into the wilderness. 24 of the 8 daughters of the Lamanites they carried into the wilderness. Mosiah 23:31, 34. And behold, they had found those priests of King Noah, in a place which they called Amulon, and they had begun to possess the land of Amulon and had begun to till the ground. Now the name of the leader of those priests was Amulon. And it came to pass that Amulon did plead with the Lamanites, and he also sent forth their wives, who were the 8 daughters of the Lamanites, to plead with their brethren, that they should not destroy their husbands. And the Lamanites had a compassion on Amulon and his brethren, and did not destroy them, because of their wives. Hinduism is sexist like in Rigveda 1:101:1. O Ritwas, the Indra who with King Rishva slayed pregnant wives of the dark demon, to that reverend Indra offer your prayers and cereals. Rigveda 1:126:3. Swana offered me 10 chariots with white horses wherein young women were seated. Rigveda 3:31:2. The son left not his portion to the brother, he made a home to hold him who should gain it. What time his parents gave the priest his being, of a good pair one acted, one promoted. Rigveda 8 hours 33 minutes and 17 seconds. The woman mind cannot be disciplined, she has very little intelligence. Damian Maria Hope made a very in-depth search of sexism in Hinduism. The women in Purs. The Purs are post-Vedic texts, which contain ancient interpretations of the universe, life, synthesis, and other metaphysical quests in form of narratives. They also have annals of ancient dynasties, guiding anecdotes, and stories which can form a directive for life. It must be noted that most of them place women at a very high pedestal, but there are some mentions of atrocities and injustice meted out to women, and there are some much unwarranted conjectures about the womenfolk. The most quoted parable of Ahalya and deceit of Indra appears in Padmapura, and famously in Ramayana. Ahalya, which means the eternal virgin, was the most beautiful lady on earth. She was wedded to sage Gautam. Her beauty was a cause of great lust to devas, in particular, Indra. One night Indra conspired to announce the onset of dawn before the actual time. Sage Gautam, assuming that it was morning, went out of the home for his daily ablutions, when the lustful Indra took the form of sage Gautam and tricked Ahalya into sexual intercourse. When Gautam found this, he cursed Indra with impotency and Ahalya with perpetual petrification. This was an incidence of rape. Apart from being just a historical data point, it also asks some subtle questions. Why was Ahalya punished in the first place? How was Gautam entitled to punish Ahalya, if at all? References note that Gautam realized his mistake and prescribed the apparition of Rama to be her ultimate liberator. The texts nowhere mention any punishment given to the vain happy sage for petrifying a woman who is considered to be one of the 5 most venerable ladies of Hindu religion. Ramandapura mentions one incidence of marital sexual violence, wherein the father of King Veganasa of Champaknagar was suffering in hell as he had violated his wife during her menstrual cycle. Then Parvata Muni, the best of all sages, closed his eyes and meditated on the king's past, present, and future. After a few moments, he opened his eyes and said, "Your father is suffering the results of committing a great sin, and I have discovered what it is." In his previous life, he quarreled with his wife and forcibly enjoyed her sexually during her menstrual period. She tried to protest and resist his advances and even yelled out, "Someone please save me. Please, oh husband, do not interrupt my monthly period in this way." Still, he did not stop or leave her alone. It is on account of this grievous sin that your father now has fallen into such a hellish condition of suffering. Ramandapura, thus, not only treachery and trickery into rape as happened in the case of Ahalya, but domestic violence even in ruling classes were present in the earliest days. There are instances in other Purs which either pronounce servitude of women towards their husbands or family, denounce their embellishments or seize their right to denial. A particularly denigrating attitude is towards a menstruating woman as she is deemed impious and untouchable. Some such examples are, those women, who last quarter of the night, suffer from infertility in future births. Those women, who do not sweep their home in the evening, remain unmarried and are bereft of wealth in future births. Such women also lose their wealth, lifespan, and reputation. Markandeya per, women wear hairpins in their hair. As if this alone were not enough, they refuse to obey their husbands. Kurum per, those women who do not serve their husbands should be expelled from the home for a period of 12 years and should not be helped in any way during the exile. Impurity resulted because of touching a woman in menses takes fast for 3 nights to get purified. Narada per, Garuda per, the Hindu predecessor of Dante's Divine Comedy which lays down the rules of a successful karmic life and rituals for the attainment of moksha and also describes the treatment of the departed soul based on his deeds fails the feminine by describing her birth itself a result of bad deeds in former lives. I did not emaciate myself by monthly fasts by the course of the moon, nor by detailed observances. Owing to my bad deeds in former lives I got a woman's body, which is a source of great misery. Garuda per -2.41, Speaking Tree, Upanishads and Smritis. Upanishads are philosophical texts outlining some key tenets of Hindu texts. They literally mean sitting near, referred to the way they were recited to the young disciples by their guides. Another interpretation says that they sit near the Vedas. Unlike Vedas and Upanishads which are Shruti, meaning as heard, Smritis are memorized traditions or historical data. Hers are also sometimes counted as Smritis. The most controversial of the Upanishads is the repeatedly quoted Brahmaryaka Upanishad, which appears to promote rape. Without a doubt, a woman who has changed her clothes at the end of her menstrual period is the most auspicious of women. When she has changed, then, one should approach that splendid woman and invite her to have sex. Should she refuse to consent, he should bribe her. If she still refuses, he should beat her with a stick or with his fists and overpower her, saying, I take away the splendor from you with my virility and splendor. Brahmaryaka Upanishad 6.4.9, 21. This verse has been voraciously defended and contested by theologians each giving their own interpretations, some blaming loss in translation and others citing metaphorical interpretations. But this is how it stands. The idea of blaming women for inciting the lust in men is also not unknown. In continuous passages, 18 to 22, of Ujjavalakya Upanishad, it goes on to establish women as caskets of all evils and the epicenter of lust. Having, attractive, tresses and putting on collyrium, women, difficult to touch but pleasing to the eyes are, verily, the flames of the fire of sin and they burn men as though they were straw. Women pleasing and cruel, are the fuel for the hellfires, that inflame even at a distance and though juicy, lovable, are devoid of moisture, flavor. Silly women are the net spread by the hunter called Cupid to entangle the bodies of men in the form of birds. Woman is the bait stuck in the fishhook at the string of evil propensity to catch men in the form of fish that are in the pond of worldly life and that are active in the mud of the mind. Enough of women to me, forever, who are the strong caskets, to preserve, all gems of evil and are the chains of misery. Manusmriti, another much criticized canon of Hindu way of life also alludes to some discriminatory edicts on the place and status of women in society. It is just sad to see that our sacred tradition and culture was built on some guiding principle which arrests the independence of woman and leave her as a subject of a male member of the family irrespective of her age. Speaking Tree, 5.147. By a girl, by a young woman, or even by an aged one, nothing must be done independently, even in her own house. 5.148 In childhood a female must be subject to her father, in youth to her husband, when her lord is dead to her sons, a woman must never be independent. 5.149 She must not seek to separate herself from her father, husband, or sons, by leaving them she would make both, her own and her husband's, families contemptible. 5.151 Him to whom her father may give her, or her brother with the father's permission, she shall obey as long as he lives, and when he is dead, she must not insult his memory. Manusmriti, chapter -5. Sadly the Manusmriti goes on to even declare that women are not fit for independence and they have irresistible inclinations towards evil. Needless to say, like the evils of Varna system, the evils of dependence of women folk seep deep into society, much due to such dystopian illusions. Her father protects her in childhood, her husband protects her in youth, and her sons protect her in old age. A woman is never fit for independence. Women must particularly be guarded against evil inclinations, however trifling they may appear, for, if they are not guarded, they will bring sorrow on two families. Speaking Tree, Manusmriti, chapter -9. The two famous epics of ancient India, Ramayana and Mahabharata, also portray a mixed image of women. The feminism was worshipped but was still at mercy of society. In Ramayana, Rama crosses the sea to save his wife Sita, whom he subjects to Agni Pariksha, a purity check by fire, which she passes but later banishes her due to doubts of some of his subjects. The case of sexual equality takes a jolt, as Rama is never subjected to any such test. Capturing someone else's wife also doesn't seem uncommon, with Raven stealing Sita and Bali capturing his brother's wife Ruma. Mahabharata portrays the gloomier situation of women, as Draupadi is first put into an irony of a marriage, then subjected to be a bet on the silly game of dice by her alleged protectors and finally subjected to being stripped in front of a spineless court full of her elders. Speaking Tree, rituals and traditions, there are protocols and there are best practices. Society seldom differentiates between the two. The gap between must and should is even thinner when it comes to religious rituals and traditions. Most of the traditions were singular instances of chastity or ethereal compassion, but were adopted and showcased by the champions of society as ways of reaching the peaks of Dharma. One of such examples is Sati. Sati gets it first mentioned in Padmapur, in the story of Vrinda, the wife of Jalandhar, who was tricked away from her fidelity towards her husband by Vishnu, whence her husband was killed. Vrinda cursed Vishnu that he will also weep in search of his wife, which he does as Rama, and takes the funeral pyre with her husband. She subsequently reincarnates as Tulsi plant. Other instances of Sati in scriptures are the story of Vasudev's Rohini, Devki, Bhadra, and Madhuri taking the funeral pyre with him. Madri, the other wife of Pandu, the father of Pandavas, also became Sati with her husband. Apart from one convoluted passage in Rigveda, Indian scriptures nowhere seem to suggest Sati, but the women who performed it are exalted in glory. Another stifling tradition is the abstinence and persecution of widows. Some texts specify that Brahman born to a remarried woman is not charitable. Others prescribe abstinent lives for widows. Garuda celebrates the death of a woman who deceases before her husband or sons. All these contribute to an auspiciousness of the widows in our culture. Devadasis and dowry are other such traditions that seep into the fibers of the society. Speaking Tree, surely, a woman who has changed her clothes at the end of her menstrual period is the most auspicious of women. When she has changed her clothes at the end of her menstrual period, therefore, one should approach that splendid woman and invite her to have sex. Should she refuse to consent, he should bribe her. If she still refuses, he should beat her with a stick or with his fists and overpower her, saying, I take away the splendor from you with my virility and splendor. 6.4.9,21. Good looks do not matter to them, nor do they care about youth, a man, they say, and enjoy sex with him, whether he is good looking or ugly. By running after men like whores, by their fickle minds, and by their natural lack of affection, these women are unfaithful to their husbands even when they are zealously guarded here. Knowing that their very own nature is like this, as it was born at the creation by the Lord of creatures, Prajapati, a man should make the utmost effort to guard them. The bed and the seat, jewelry, lust, anger, crookedness, a malicious nature, and bad conduct are what Manu assigned to women. There is no ritual with Vedic verses for women. This is a firmly established point of law. For women, who have no virile strength, and no Vedic verses, are falsehood. This is well established. Manusmriti 9:14-18. Men must make their women dependent day and night, and keep under their own control those who are attached to sensory objects. Her father guards her in childhood, her husband guards her in youth, and her sons guard her in old age. A woman is not fit for independence. Manusmriti 9:2-4. The mind of woman cannot be disciplined, she has very little intelligence. Rigveda 8.33.33-34. A woman who has been unchanged should worship Shiva in his calm aspect, Shiva who is Kama. Then she should summon a Brahmin and give herself to him, thinking, and this is Kama who has come for the sake of sexual pleasure. And whatever the Brahmin wishes, the sensuous woman should do. For 13 months she should honor in this way any Brahmin who comes to the house for the sake of sexual pleasures, and there is no immorality in this for noble ladies or prostitutes. Matsya Purana 70:40-60, cf. Mahabharata 3:2:23. Manusmriti, the laws of Manu. The Manusmriti is an ancient Vedic book that contained verses that outline the way people and society should conduct itself, both towards religious duties and general aspects of life. It was a revered and important text and its origin is estimated to date back to 500 BC. The following are translated verses that pertain to the roles and treatment of women. 5.148. In childhood a female must be subject to her father, in youth to her husband, when her lord is dead to her sons. A woman must never be independent. 5.149 She must not seek to separate herself from her father, husband, or sons. By leaving them she would make both her own and her husband's families contemptible. 5.150 She must always be cheerful, clever in the management of her household affairs, careful in cleaning her utensils, and economical in expenditure. 5.151 Him to whom her father may give her, or her brother with the father's permission, she shall obey as long as he lives, and when he is dead, she must not insult his memory. 5.152 For the sake of procuring good fortune to brides, the recitation of benedictory texts, svasthayana, and the sacrifice to the lord of creatures, pragapati, are used at weddings, but the betrothal, by the father or guardian, is the cause of the husband's dominion over his wife. 5.154 Though destitute of virtue, or seeking pleasure, elsewhere, or devoid of good qualities, yet, a husband must be constantly worshipped as a god by a faithful wife. 5.155 No sacrifice, no vow, no fast must be performed by women apart from their husbands. If a wife obeys her husband, she will for that reason alone be exalted in heaven. 5.156 A faithful wife, who desires to dwell, after death, with her husband, must never do anything that might displease him who took her hand, whether he be alive or dead. 5.157 At her pleasure let her emaciate her body by living on pure flowers, roots, and fruit, but she must never even mention the name of another man after her husband has died. 5.158 Until death let her be patient, of hardships, self-controlled, and chaste, and strive to fulfill that most excellent duty which is prescribed for wives who have one husband only. 5.160 A virtuous wife who after the death of her husband constantly remains chaste, reaches heaven, though she has no son, just like those chaste men. 5.161 But a woman who from a desire to have offspring violates her duty towards her deceased husband, brings on herself disgrace in this world and loses her place with her husband in heaven. 5.162 Offspring begotten by another man is here not considered lawful, nor does offspring begotten on another man's wife belong to the begetter, nor is a second husband anywhere prescribed for virtuous women. 5.163 She who cohabits with a man of higher caste, forsaking her own husband who belongs to a lower one, will become contemptible in this world and is called a remarried woman. Parapurva. 5.164 By violating her duty towards her husband, a wife is disgraced in this world. After death, she enters the womb of a jackal and is tormented by diseases, the punishment of her sin. 5.165 She who, controlling her thoughts, words, and deeds, never slights her lord, resides, after death, with her husband, in heaven, and is called a virtuous wife. 5.166 In reward of such conduct, a female who controls her thoughts, speech, and actions, gains in this life highest renown, and in the next world, a place near her husband. 5.167 A twice-born man, versed in the sacred law, shall burn a wife of an equal caste who conducts herself thus and dies before him, with the sacred fires used for the Agnihotra, and with the sacrificial implements. 5.168 Having thus, at the funeral, given the sacred fires to his wife who dies before him, he may marry again and again kindle the fires. Bhagavad Gita from Chapter 1, Text 40 or 40 and 41 AC Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Translation. When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become corrupt, and from the degradation of womanhood, O descendant of Vrsni, comes unwanted progeny. Edwin Arnold Translation. And rights neglected, piety extinct enters impiety upon that home, its women grow unwomaned, whence there spring mad passions, and the mingling up of castes. Ramanand Prasad Translation. And when immorality prevails, O Krishna, the women of the family become corrupted. When women are corrupted, social problems arise. Sri Aurobindo Translation. Owing to the predominance of lawlessness, O Krishna, the women of the family become corrupt, women corrupted, O Varshnaya, the confusion of the Varnas arises. W.Q. Judge Translation. From the influence of impiety the females of a family grow vicious, and from women that are become vicious are born the spurious caste called Varnasankara from Chapter 9, Text 32 and 33. Those who take shelter in me, though they are of lower birth women, merchants, and workers can attain the supreme destination. How much more this is so of the righteous Brahmanas, the devotees, and the saintly kings. Therefore, having come to this temporary, miserable world, engage in loving service unto me. If you read these two verses, Lord Krishna clearly suggests women are considered of lower birth and that God realization is easy for those who not women, merchants, or workers. The lower castes are part of a four-segmented system which Lord Krishna clarifies in Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 4, Text 13, Brahmins, priesthood, Kshatriyas, nobles, warrior, or rulers, Vaishyas, merchants and professional class, and Shudras, workers, artisans and laborers. The last two merchants were workers but especially workers were the fourth and lowest of the traditional social classes of India. Shudras are not permitted to perform the Upanayana, the initiatory rite into the study of the Vedas, earliest sacred literature of India. The Shudra social class includes a wide spectrum of endogamous status groups with dominant, land-downing groups at one end of the scale and near untouchables at the other. These variations derive from the belief that certain behavior patterns and occupations are polluting, a concept that gave rise to a distinction between clean and unclean Shudra groups. For example, washers, tanners, shoemakers, sweepers, and scavengers were once relegated to the status of untouchable. Buddhism is sexist while I have praised the Buddha and Buddhism in cases but even them are not immune to this like. Gautama Buddha, Madhyamika Nikaya 3. In crossing the river from Sasra to emancipation, crocodiles are a designation for women. Gautama Buddha, Dingha Nikaya 3. If it were not for women being admitted into our order, my teachings would have lasted 1,000 years, now they will not last 500. Gautama Buddha, Sayud Nikaya 4. Women, with their two-fingered wisdom i.e. stupid, have a difficult time understanding what I teach. Gautama Buddha, Agutara Nikaya 3.14. It cannot happen that a woman may become a Tathagata, a Samsam Buddha. The tale of King Udayana of Valsa. Women can be the cause of great suffering. If the desire is destroyed there will be everlasting happiness, and the dead snake and dog are detestable, but women are even more detestable than they are. The 8 heavy duties. A nun, even if she has been ordained for 100 years, must respect, greet and bow in reverence to the feet of a monk, even if he has just been ordained that day. A nun is not to stay in a residence where there is no monk. A nun is to look forward to two duties, asking for the fortnightly aposeta, meeting day, and receiving instructions from a monk every fortnight. A nun who has completed her rains retreat must offer herself for instruction to both the community of monks and to the community of nuns, based on what is seen, what is heard and what is doubted. A nun who is put on probation for violating a monastic rule of Sanghatissa must serve a 15-day minimum probation, with reinstatement requiring approval from both the monk and nun communities. A woman must be ordained by both monks and nuns and may be ordained only after a 2-year postulancy, or training in 6 precepts. A nun may not reprimand a monk. From today onwards, no nun shall ever teach a monk. However, monks may teach nuns. Pure Land School believe a woman has to be reincarnate as a man in order to reach nirvana, and Theravada Buddhists believe that women can never become a Buddha. Jainism is sexist like I mentioned in my previous chapters, but also in Svetambara's scriptures, and Yadaprabhadha believe that women has less authority than men and women's genitals and breasts are the source of impurity and menstruation kill living bacteria which cause bad karma. Confucianism is sexist-like. Analect 1725. Shaoran and girls are difficult to handle. If you get familiar with them, they cease to be humble. If you keep them away, they get resentful. Neo-Confucian went to more extremes of how to treat women, and these are their sayings which I put together as one. A woman's duty is not to control or take charge. Woman's greatest duty is to produce a son. A woman ruler is like a hen crowing. A husband can marry twice, but his wife must never remarry. We should not be too familiar with the lower orders or with women. The woman with no talent is the one who has merit. Disorder is not sent down by heaven, it is produced by women. Those who cannot be taught, cannot be instructed. These are women and eunuchs. There are 3 unfilial acts. The greatest of these is the failure to produce sons. Women are to be led and to follow others. Women's nature is passive. A woman should look on her husband as if he were heaven itself, and ever weary of thinking how she may yield to him. Islam is sexist like in Sahih Muslim 36:6597. I looked into the fire and there I found the majority constituted by women, but this is not the only time women are the majority in hell like in Sahih Muslim 36:6596, Sahih Muslim 36:6598, Sahih Muslim 36:6600, Sahih Bukhari 1:2:28, Sahih Bukhari 2:24:541, Sahih Bukhari 7:62:126, Sahih Bukhari 7:62:124, Sahih Muslim 36:6599, Sahih Muslim 36:6601, Sahih Bukhari 1:6:301, Sahih Bukhari 2:18:161, and Sahih Bukhari 7:62:125. Sahih Bukhari 1:6:301. Once Allah's apostle went out to the Musalla of Id al-Adha or al-Fitr prayer. Then he passed by the women and said, O women, give alms, as I have seen that the majority of the dwellers of hellfire were you, women. They asked, why is it so, O Allah's apostle? He replied, you curse frequently and are ungrateful to your husbands. I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. A cautious sensible man could be led astray by some of you. The women asked, O Allah's apostle, what is deficient in our intelligence and religion? He said, is not the evidence of 2 women equal to witness of 1 man? They replied in the affirmative. He said, this is the deficiency in her intelligence. Isn't it true that a woman can neither pray nor fast during her menses? The women replied in the affirmative. He said, this is the deficiency in her religion. In Audiobook 2150, Allah told the man to rape women. The apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, sent a military expedition to Oz on the occasion of the Battle of Yunnan. They met their enemy and fought with them. They defeated them and took them captives. Some of the companions of the apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, were reluctant to have intercourse with the female captives in the presence of their husbands who were unbelievers. So Allah, the Exalted, sent down the Quranic verse, Surah 424, and all married women are forbidden unto you save those captives whom your right hands possess. IBN Ishaq/Hisham 693. Then the apostle sent Sadb Zayd al-Ansari, brother of Abdu al-Ashal, with some of the captive women of Banu Qurayza to Najd, and he sold them for horses and weapons. Sahih Muslim 4345. And then we attacked from all sides and reached their watering place where a battle was fought. Some of the enemies were killed and some were taken prisoners. I saw a group of persons that consisted of women and children escaping in the distance. I was afraid lest they should reach the mountain before me, so I shot an arrow between them and the mountain. When they saw the arrow, they stopped. So I brought them, driving them along. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:223. Your wives are as a tilth unto you, so approach your tilth when or how ye will. A man has dominion over his wives' bodies as he does his land. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:228. And the men are a degree above than women. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:282. And call to witness, from among your men, 2 witnesses. And if 2 men are not found, then a man and 2 women. Al-Quran Surah 4. In Nisa, Ayah 3. Marry women of your choice, 2 or 3 or 4. Surah An-Nisa 4:11. The male shall have the equal of the portion of 2 females. Surah An-Nisa 4:15. As for those of your women who are guilty of lewdness, call to witness 4 of you against them. And if they testify to the truth of the allegation, then confine them to the houses until death takes them. Surah An-Nisa 4:34. Men are in charge of women, because Allah hath made one of them to excel the other, and because they spend of their property, for the support of women. So good women are obedient, guarding in secret that which Allah hath guarded. As for those from whom ye fear rebellion, admonish them and banish them to beds apart, and scourge them. Then if they obey you, seek not a way against them. Surah An-Nisa 4:176. Unto the male is the equivalent of the share of 2 females. Surah Al-Ma'idah 5:6. And if ye are unclean, purify yourselves. And if ye are sick or on a journey, or one of you cometh from the closet, or ye have had contact with women, and ye find not water, then go to clean, high ground and rub your faces and your hands with some of it. Surah An-Nur 24:4. And those who accuse free women then do not bring 4 witnesses, to adultery, flog them. Surah An-Nur 24:13. Why did they not bring 4 witnesses of it? But as they have not brought witnesses, they are liars before Allah. Surah An-Nur 24:31. Women are to lower their gaze around men, so they do not look them in the eye. Surah Al-Ahzab 33:30. O ye wives of the Prophet, whosoever of you committeth manifest lewdness, the punishment for her will be doubled, and that is easy for Allah. Surah Al-Ahzab 33:33. And abide quietly in your homes. Surah Al-Ahzab 33:53. When ye ask of them, the wives of the Prophet, anything, ask it of them from behind a curtain. That is purer for your hearts and for their hearts. And it is not for you to cause annoyance to the messenger of Allah, nor that ye should ever marry his wives after him. Lo, that in Allah's sight would be an enormity. Surah Al-Ahzab 33:59. Tell thy wives and thy daughters and the women of the believers to draw their cloaks close round them. Surah Ghafir 40:20. And if ye wish to exchange one wife for another. Surah An-Najm 53:27. Those who believe not in the hereafter, name the angels with female names. Surah At-Talaq 65:1. O Prophet, when ye, men, put away women. Surah At-Tarim 66:1-5. Maybe, his Lord, if he Muhammad divorce you, will give him in your place wives better than you, submissive, faithful, obedient, penitent, adorers, fasters, widows and virgins. Sunan Abu Dawud book number 2 hadith number 704. When one of you prays without a sutra, a dog, an ass, a pig, a Jew, a Magian, and a woman cut off his prayer, but it will suffice if they pass in front of him at a distance of over a stone's throw. Abu Dawud book 005, hadith number 2155. Women are compared to slaves and camels with regard to the evil in them. Sunan Abu Dawud book number 12 hadith number 2141. Ayas ben Abd Allah ben Abi Idubab reported the apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, as saying, do not beat Allah's handmaidens. But when Umar came to the apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, and said, women have become emboldened towards their husbands, he, the prophet, gave permission to beat them. Then many women came round the family of the apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, complaining against their husbands. So the apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, said, many women have gone round Muhammad's family complaining against their husbands. They are not the best among you. At first, Muhammad forbade men from beating their wives, but he rescinded this once it was reported that women were becoming emboldened toward their husbands. Beatings are sometimes necessary to keep women in their place. Abu Dawud book 005, hadith number 2142. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, a man will not be asked as to why he beat his wife. Sunan Abu Dawud book number 2 hadith number 567. Apostle of Allah during a journey said to me, Uqba, should I not teach you two best surahs ever recited? He then taught me, say, I seek refuge in the Lord of Adon, and say, I seek refuge in the Lord of men. Sahih al-Bukhari book number 6 hadith number 301. Muhammad said, is not the evidence of two women equal to the witness of one man? They replied in the affirmative. He said, this is the deficiency in her intelligence. Allah has made women deficient in the practice of their religion as well, by giving them menstrual cycles. Sahih al-Bukhari book number 62 hadith number 81. According to Muhammad, the most important part of a marriage contract is the unrestricted access that a man has to his wife's vagina. Sahih al-Bukhari book number 62 hadith number 58. A woman presents herself in marriage to Muhammad, but he does not find her attractive, so he donates her on the spot to another man. Sahih al-Bukhari book number 59 hadith number 462. The background for the Quranic requirement of 4 witnesses to adultery. Muhammad's favorite wife, Aisha, was accused of cheating on her polygamous husband. 3 witnesses corroborated the event, but Muhammad did not want to believe it, and so established the arbitrary rule that 4 witnesses are required. Sahih al-Bukhari book number 72 hadith number 715. A woman came to Muhammad and begged her to stop her husband from beating her. Her skin was bruised so badly that she is described as being greener than the green veil she was wearing. Muhammad did not admonish her husband but instead ordered her to return to him and submit to his sexual desires. Sahih al-Bukhari book number 88 hadith number 219. Never will succeed such a nation as makes a woman their ruler. Sahih al-Bukhari book number 4 hadith number 149. Muhammad's wives are even trained to defecate on his command. Sahih al-Bukhari book number 48 hadith number 826. Women have a deficiency of intelligence, meaning that their decisions will not be comparable to a man's. Sahih al-Bukhari book number 58 hadith number 125. Women are tradable commodities. A Muslim with 2 wives offers a fellow Muslim his pick between the 2. Muhammad then arranges a wedding banquet. Hadith. This can be for an offense as petty as merely being alone with a man to whom she is not related. Sahih Muslim book number 4 hadith number 969. Commands that a married woman be put in a separate room and beaten lightly if she acts in a sexual manner toward others. Hadith 593. As for Ali, he said, women are plentiful, and you can easily change one for another. From the captives of Yunnan, Allah's messenger gave his son-in-law Ali a slave girl called Baitab, and he gave future Caliph Uthman a slave girl called Zainab and future Caliph Umar another. Muhammad struck his wife Aisha when she left the house without his permission. Aisha narrates Sahih Muslim in book number 4 hadith number 2127, he struck me on the chest which caused me pain. Sahih Muslim book number 4 hadith number 1039. Aisha said to Muhammad, you have made us equal to the dogs and the asses. Sahih Muslim book number 8 hadith number 3306. A woman without a husband has more right to her person than her guardian, and a virgin's consent must be asked from her, and her silence implies her consent. Tabari 8:117. Dihaya had asked the messenger for Safiya when the prophet chose her for himself. The apostle traded for Safiya by giving Dihaya her 2 cousins. The women of Kabar were distributed among the Muslims. Tabari 9:137. Allah granted Rayhana of the Qurayza to Muhammad as booty. Ishaq 969. Men were to lay injunctions on women lightly, for they were prisoners of men and had no control over their persons. This same text also justifies beating women for flirting. Tabari vol 9, number 1754. Treat women well, for they are like domestic animals with you and do not possess anything for them. From Muhammad's farewell sermon. This is why that religion should die from their history of violence, sexism, racism, hatred, homophobia, and anti-intellectualism with their false delusions. Plus the discrimination of unbelievers has been around so long that even in July 5, 2019 the country Cyprus the government provided school resources that said atheists are without moral inhibitions and telling children that let's avoid atheism so we can stay away from their bad and sinful consequences. For some reason these people had this sudden urge to try to convert everybody to their religion, called, or its version of ism, while I barely see this from the atheist, agnostic and deist. They don't have this urge to convert them, they just talk about ideas to understand reality instead of threatening them with a fate worse than death like hell, God's wrath, or other nonsense. Other examples of anti-science thinking by the 2 biggest denominations of the 2 biggest religions, Sunni and Roman Catholic. The majority of Sunni Islamic countries that natural sciences have not been fully institutionalized, suffer scientific illiteracy like people believe that polio does not exist and is a Western creation to submit to their agenda. Many students of physics with master's degree and even PhDs believe that earthquakes are not natural phenomenon but instead are caused by sin. And leaving the true Islamic faith which is based on the Sunni theological school of Ash'ari. Muslims still believe the literal 6-day creation myth of Genesis. There are no consensus for how to respond to evolution by Islamic scholars, and most countries either reject evolution or at least half the people accepted evolution, while countries like Lebanon where 78% accept evolution but Turkey banned or tried to ban evolution in universities. Even during the Islamic Golden Age, 8th to 16th century, where they discovered Greco-Roman texts and made scientific progress, but in the 15th century most Islamic scholars believe the world is flat like it said in the Quran and rejected the Greek sphere earth in Tafsir al-Jalalain, Quran 88:20. The earth is flat, which is the opinion of the scholars of the revealed law, and not a ball as astronomers claim, and during the Golden Age the Islamic civilization completely moved away from science. In the 11th century Lead by Nizam al-Mulki created a system of education known as Nizamiyya that focused on religious studies, which the first time in Islamic history, religious studies became institutionalized, which is based in Sunni fundamentalism and rejected rationalism. The Roman Catholic Church had little interest of science, but when they do science as long it does not conflict with their doctrine is fine, but they were against evolution and the church did not accept it until 1950. 91 years after Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species, but when they accepted evolution but paradoxically have to believe the literal story of Adam and Eve and original sin, which evolution debunks this myth, and only 33% of Roman Catholics accepted evolution. The Roman Catholic Church is a respected dictatorship that is against progress, like Pope Pius IX declared that liberalism, rationalism, and freedom of religion were heretical in his work Syllabus of Errors. Other things that is anti-democratic is that you vote something that the Vatican is against is a moral sin. Justinian the Great, who bring the golden age of the Byzantine Empire, restricted Jews of their rights. Manichaeans were persecuted including death. The worship of Amun was abolished. Nicaea Christianity was the official religion and persecute other Christians that don't subscribe to their specific sect. The most cruel example from the Jewish God is that when Moses was traveling that God ordered him to use magical words to produce water from rocks, but Moses just tapped the rock with his magical stick instead, using magic words that God punished him by him dying before reaching the promised land. God-like metaphysical world is a human invention. Plato's two-world theory, motivated by fear of the unknown and a desire to escape suffering, fabricated by psychological needs and the visible, metaphysical/ontological naturalism/atheism. World is the only reality there is, like in the words of Nietzsche, remain faithful to the earth, and to invent fables about a world other than this one has no meaning at all, or the words of Heraclitus, I see nothing other than becoming, or the words of Schopenhauer, the world is my representation, and the words of Jean-Paul Sartre, existence precedes essence. False prophets, false beliefs, and many other things that religious people, especially theologians and apologetics, bring the greatest falsehood of all, and I'm glad since the 15th century and beyond religion is slowly dying, and skepticism, pragmatism, empiricism, rationalism, secular humanism, methodological naturalism, mathematical logic, philosophical logic, philosophy of mathematics, philosophy of science, philosophy of philosophy, and post-positivism has dominated and shows us the reality, proof and truth of everything, and by consequence atheism has been on the rise ever since, and other irreligious views like agnosticism, non-theism, openism, skepticalism, and others that it has shown the every generation has passed. The younger the generation, the more atheistic have become, and those 23 countries shows us the positive effects of living in a godless society. It is only a matter of time that education, technological and scientific progress improve and religion will be a thing of the past. Update. This is a brief about my views because at the time I finished this work I was re-evaluating my entire views, which in the end I reached my conclusion but modify a little, like my views on scientific realism vs instrumentalism, which all the evidence points to take my position of metaphysics, atheism/naturalism/physicalism. Thus this will be a continuation/expanded view of this work. Thanks to research of scientists and mathematicians about the universe that we know the truth, and the answer is metaphysical naturalism, metaethical naturalism, physicalism, nominalism, and compatibilism. It corresponded with reality, and thanks to the scientific method, mixed with pragmatism, Bayesianism, and Occam's razor, it became the most powerful tool that so far no other method surpass it, and by consequence it shows that nature is ultimate, a posteriori, abductive reasoning, and empiricism as the best and most powerful form of knowledge, observation, experimentation, and falsifiability. All of our understanding is trough experience, observation, and from the senses, and is the ultimate basis of knowledge, from both cognitive/non-cognitive knowledge and language. Also by consequence, thanks to our scientific and mathematical progress, we eventually discovered that numbers are not real in a Platonic sense, but instead numbers are just pure definition using set theory, proof theory, and mathematical logic using Zermelo-Fraenkel's set theory, which is the foundation of math, and that is how numbers work are conceived by definition to communicate, and all mathematical theorems are analytical in nature, or in other words true by definition and just human invention. Because of this, our metaphysical truth should be consistent with mathematical and scientific fact. People may call this as scientific realism, where observable and unobservable aspects of the world are at least approximately true, thanks to their powerful predictive value debunking things that were thought as supernatural, and there was never a moment when a supernatural explanation was correct and natural explanation is false. The laws of nature, uniformity, are extremely powerful predictive value/explanatory power and very accurate. Astronomy is the strongest example, and adding Bayesian/Occam's razor is more powerful than adding any ad hoc assumptions, and the simplest answer of reality is that everything is made of quantum foam, fluctuation of space-time, and was detected in 2009, thus proving at least to some extent we finally prove quantum gravity, and neutrino, everything is reducible to physicalism. Because of this, we finally have answers to our biggest questions like the existence of the universe, what caused the universe. The answer is quantum inflation, that the universe never have a beginning, past eternal, and by consequence it never ends. When protons decay leaving only neutrinos that continues to thin forever, the universe continued to expand infinitely, thus absolute nothing is impossible, and also evidence point to the multiverse, thus the universe and multiverse are eternal. Where does life come from? The answer is abiogenesis, when scientists for the first time recreate how life originated using the RNA model, and Stanley Miller's experiment of the origin of life has been proven. The source of life, which protocells are, form which evolution will take his role creating life as we know it, and because of this we can now make man-made DNA and created the first ever living robot, not made of plastic but entirely of organic material, a brand new life form. Thus people who reject naturalistic explanation of life, and unlike theists like John Haldane in 2003 who believes that Darwinian evolution failed to explain the origin of life but by RNA experiments shows that life is spontaneous, which RNA are capable of self-replications, where evolution and random mutation were in math, when a group of atoms or molecules is driven by external energy source, thermodynamics, surrounded by heat bath will gradually restructure itself in order to capture and dissipate increasingly more energy, thus under right conditions, which this process is called dissipation-driven adaptation, thus spontaneous self-assembly process under chemical conditions created life, thus naturalism is the final answer. Do we have free will? The answer is compatibilism, because we are determined by certain factors, physics, genetics, environment, wealth, geography, lax awareness, under the influence, mental illness, tumors, brain damage, and actions against its will, but our actions is doing what we want, and those decisions are cause of who you are, where your will and desires are one and the same. Having control is our freedom in a deterministic nature of the universe with internal feelings of freedom. Like a case when a tumor in the brain causes a person to express pedophilic behavior, but once removed this behavior is gone, thus we are free from deliberate control of other agents in a universe determined by physical laws. The brain use illusions to appeal the limits of the brain's perceptual processing, and the brain will distort our perception of choice that gives the illusion of free will, and anticipate future events. Where does consciousness come from? The answer is biology. Every expert on the brain will tell you that rejecting the Darwinian approach to consciousness is rejecting reality. The process of evolution gives us our physical brain, and information processing gives us through experience from the senses generates consciousness. Evidence like when certain parts of the brain can either affect or lose certain emotions, like happiness, reasoning, senses, like pain, which is given by the parasympathetic nervous system. It requires to have a physical brain to have consciousness, and when the brain is destroyed, so is conscious, thus the person will no longer exist. Chemistry and biology is the reason we have our conscious, like when neural excitations in the motor cortex send electrochemical signals down through the efferent nerve channels to the appropriate muscles, and when psychologists use medications to change the chemical process to our brain in order to change their mood. Our conscious are subjects to the laws of chemistry to function. Evidence of the dependence of mental states on brain is so strong that rejecting physicalism is rejecting gravity. Another evidence like neurological deficits, in the words of Jamie Horder, in hemi neglect, a syndrome usually associated with damage to the parietal cortex on the right-hand side of the brain. Patients lose awareness of the left side of their bodies. The left sides of their bodies are both paralyzed and numb, yet they are not aware of this and will cheerfully deny that there is anything wrong with them, for as far as they are concerned, they do not have a left side. A hemi neglect patient's body, which only consists of the right half of the body in that patient's experience, is functioning perfectly normally. Even the designation neglect is somewhat misleading. You cannot be blamed for neglecting something which, to you, does not exist at all. If a patient's attention is drawn to the arm attached to his torso, lying motionless to his left, and he is pressed to give an account of it, he will typically reply that it must be someone else's arm. In other cases, patients will admit that it is their arm, but claim that there is nothing wrong with it. When asked to move it, however, they reply that they are tired and can't be bothered to do that right now, or make other rationalizations along these lines. Such patients also tend to ignore everything that happens on the left side of the world. They will eat half of the food on their plate. Asked to draw a clock, they draw a semicircle. And so on. To these patients, the world just is the right-hand side of the world. There is, therefore, nothing missing. The parallel with dreams and delirium is, I hope, rather obvious. Intuitively, you feel that, were you unfortunate enough to lose control of your left arm, you would realize that something was wrong, just as you like to think that you would be skeptical of a pink unicorn in the corner, or a wildly fluctuating fuel meter. But this is not always the case. The physiology of sleep offers some clues as to why. During dreamless sleep, most of the brain essentially goes into standby mode. The electroencephalogram, EEG, trace, a record of electrical activity, is dominated by a simple rhythm, strong, slow delta waves that essentially wipe out the complex activity seen during normal waking consciousness. During dreaming rapid eye movement, REM, sleep, however, the slow waves disappear and the EEG is almost indistinguishable from being awake. Most of the brain is back in action, including the areas responsible for perception, memory, and emotion. Yet a small number of brain areas, such as the prefrontal cortex and the precuneus, remain underactive, and, yet if delirians are able to produce hallucinations that seem entirely real, they are not merely producing certain perceptions, they are also removing the mind's ability to judge the origin of such perceptions. This is counterintuitive. Most of us would like to think that if we saw a pink unicorn standing in the corner of our bedroom, we would realize that something odd was going on. I must be dreaming or hallucinating. That's impossible. But that is not what happens with these drugs. It does happen with others. LSD produces colorful visions, but they are usually recognized for what they are rather than mistaken for real perceptions. Not so with anticholinergics. This shows that, at the very least, our faculties of judgment and discernment are susceptible to chemical control. Yet this obviously raises the question of what mental states, if any, are not subject to chemical manipulation. Similar hallucinations are also seen in various neurological and mental disorders. Severe Alzheimer's disease, for example, is often associated with hallucinations that patients believe to be real even when they have been told countless times that they are ill, and that hallucinations are one of the symptoms. Where do our morals come from? The answer is metaethical naturalism thanks to psychological, sociological, and anthropological observation that evolutionary understanding of morality, sociology, genetics, and neurology, and habits among people as a social species shows us the origins of ethics. Morality is a science part of ecology. Humans communicate and under certain situation on their environment makes decisions of what is best for their band, society, and tribes and learn the consequence of their actions for the betterment of survival. Humans adapt and use cooperation to improve our decision and make better actions. Evidence points to neuroscience, evolution, psychology, and game theory in academic textbook on moral psychology prove ethical naturalism. Simulations of the evolutionary process showed that only certain decision rules for conferring benefits on unrelated others were evolutionarily stable. For example, always cooperate, a decision rule that distributes benefits to others regardless of whether the recipients ever provide benefits in return, is not evolutionarily stable. It is selected out in any environment that includes decision rules that sometimes cheat, fail to reciprocate. But tit for tat, a decision rule that helps reciprocators but not cheaters, is an S, and Niece's words express her expectations about social exchange, which form an implicit social contract. If you are to get food in the future from me, then you must share food with me. Whether we are sand foragers or city dwellers, we all realize that the act of accepting a benefit from someone triggers an obligation to behave in a way that somehow benefits the provider, now or in the future. Another evidence according to U.S. National Library of Medicine National Institutes of Health, the field of cognitive neuroscience have made tremendous progress in the effort to understand the neural basis of human morality. The emerging insights from this research point toward a model in which automatic processing in parallel neural circuits, many of which are associated with social emotions, evaluate the actions and intentions of others. Through various mechanisms of competition, only a subset of these circuits ultimately causes a decision or an action. This activity is experienced consciously as a subjective moral sense of right or wrong, and an interpretive process offers post hoc explanations designed to link the social stimulus with the subjective moral response using whatever explicit information is available. And, during fMRI scanning, participants read a brief vignette and selected the most semantically congruent sentence from two options to complete the narrative. The options were immoral, moral, or neutral statements. RT was fastest for the selection of neutral statements and slowest for immoral statements. Neuroimaging analyses revealed that responses involving morally laden content engage default and executive control network brain regions including medial and rostral prefrontal cortex, and core regions of the salience network, including anterior insula and dorsal anterior cingulate. Immoral vs moral conditions additionally engage the salience network. These results implicate the salience network in the detection of moral information, which may modulate downstream default and frontal control network interactions in the service of complex moral reasoning and decision-making processes. These findings suggest that moral cognition involves both bottom-up and top-down attentional processes, mediated by discrete large-scale brain networks and their interactions. Apes in general have morals, and studies show primates developing early things of morality. Macaques and chimpanzees have a sense of social order and rules of expected behavior, mostly to do with the hierarchical natures of their societies, in which each member knows its own place. Young rhesus monkeys learn quickly how to behave, and occasionally get a finger or toe bitten off as punishment. Other primates also have a sense of reciprocity and fairness. They remember who did them favors and who did them wrong. Chimps are more likely to share food with those who have groomed them. Capuchin monkeys show their displeasure if given a smaller reward than a partner receives for performing the same task, like a piece of cucumber instead of a grape. Empathy is the root of morality of not only humans, not only other apes but all animals. There is no God is metaphysically impossible thanks to our understanding of the universe since the 2nd century. Nature is always the answer. Physicalism is simpler than ism. There is no relevant data that physicalism fails to explain. Physicalism is the most minimal with the least ad hoc assumptions, and physicalism have no less explanatory breadth and depth than any competing view, and theism is just a product of human culture and misunderstanding of the physical world. Religion and New Age beliefs made profit from selling alternative medicine and using the media to distort people of believing paranormal activity like ghost hunting, astrology, rainbow body, Akashic records. Shamans have better knowledge of psychology and medicine than professionally trained doctors and etc. But in reality, 1/3 of all alternative medicine has been tested, thus you have extremely high chances to have dangerous results, both physical and mental health, and is a disgrace that the media showing supernatural activities and experts as legit instead of teaching people about skepticism and pragmatism. We already know where the belief of God and afterlife comes from, yet like alternative medicine prefer beautiful lies than reality, while the media shows proof of ghosts, the oldest myth in human history, but scientists already know where beliefs in ghost, haunted houses, ghost sightings and etc. comes from. It comes from human instinct, like when people talk about haunted houses is actually about temperature changes when during the warmth of the day the wood beams expand and in evening when cool down and begin to contract, which cause creaks and groaning that you can hear, which sounds like someone moving in the house, which produce infrasound which humans can't hear but can faintly detect, which combine with hyperactive agent detection/agency, which humans presume an agent is there for survival instincts, which when a human is scared its hair stands because when our ancestors were a lot hairier made them look bigger and become more sensitive to wind direction so you can be downwind of your predator, real and imagen, which this hypersensitivity causes you to detect temperature variances better, which is how ghost, demons, angels, exorcism, monsters, and other creatures, stories are born. More evidence shows when people experience ghost the sensation comes from neurological/psychiatric disorders or exposed to extreme conditions like losing a loved one where the sadness creates an illusion they can see ghost of their loved ones, which scientists can recreate these experiences thus created. Ghosts in the lab where studying the brain finds abnormalities in areas of the brain where how the brain sees the body and one's own spatial self-awareness, which these experiences of ghost can be recreated on both healthy and non-healthy people. The sensation is caused by altered perception of their own bodies in the brain, thus disproving ghost. Your brain is playing tricks on you. In physics, the existence of the afterlife is impossible. Learning particle physics and the Large Hadron Collider, where the idea of ghost/soul is disproven when the standard model of physics shows that is not possible for a substance that can carry our information after death. The second law of thermodynamics states that the total entropy of an isolated system always increase over time, and entropy is measure of randomness or disorder within a closed or isolated system, and when usable energy is lost, chaos increases without extra energy, and the progression of disorder can never be reversed, thus you energy. Ghost can never get back all the energy you put in, thus impossible for to maintain their existence for any period of time. The universe does not allow for information stored in our brains persist after we die, thus ghost, including God and the supernatural in general, is not only disproven but impossible. Sensations of the supernatural were misunderstandings because these experiences happens because humans can't hear frequencies below 20 Hz, but it affects us with feelings of terror, distress, and anxiety. Fear frequency that vibrate our eyeballs to induce hallucinations, like ghost/God. Certain electromagnetic fields create similar sensations by the power of psychological suggestion, thus when you hear, see, or even being grabbed by supernatural forces, it is carbon monoxide poisoning. It happens in your bed, sleep paralysis, thus these experiences happens because you are poisoning, subjected electromagnetic and oral sensations. The same goes to miracles, which shows our people using pareidolia, which neuroscience found when religious experience, miracles, and communication to God happens in the right temporal lobe, which causes epilepsy, seizures, and psychosis, which cause hallucinations and delusions, which the culture also plays a big role of what delusions a person will see. Another psychological factor is confirmation bias. When someone already believes in agents beyond humans, then belief in miracles becomes common sense to them, and any event which seems impossible, like a soldier in Iraq going back to the US but got stuck in Spain, which needs money to pay, and a mysterious stranger comes, gets your credit card somehow, not only figure out your secret number but enough money to go back home, and when the soldier is perplexed, which later try to say thank you when facing this stranger, it disappears. Is this a miracle? No, because we live in a world where almost reaching 10 billion in population that a probability something that strange event occurs that becomes almost inevitable. This is called probability theory, the main theory for economics, statistics, and all business and similar fields, which events like these people by bias believe as miracles while forgetting all bad events, and thanks to statistics that extremely rare events takes place regularly and extremely rare events within the physical world are not miracles, period. End of story. The general population invent past experiences because they imagine an event occurring, and studies show that people are twice as likely to report false autobiographical memories because they imagined a hypothetical/fictitious event which later reported as a genuine occurrence, and people who have dissociation problems are incapable to differentiate between actual memories and false memories, which these people spend frequently imagine religious experiences and out-of-body experiences, and young children and people over 60 are prone to mistaken remembrances and identifications. People who are under the influence, fatigue, illness, and extreme stress that memories and perception is susceptible to distortion, and when people recollect events cannot discriminate between true and false memories, and people unconsciously invent details which becomes real memories, and expressing amazement about miracles can increase people's certainty about the event's authenticity when people unconsciously suggest their stories are correct by displaying approval signals in the story's content. Memories can change over time. The longer the event took place, the memory becomes more distorted. When the person wants something to remember, which artificially create false memories to fit the person's views and beliefs. When people believe or want to believe in miracles, are subject to confirmation bias by interpreting unexplained events as valid of their already held religious beliefs. Humans by nature assume agency in others for survival and have tendency to see connections in events when there is none. The same goes for prophecies when people like Nostradamus, when in reality in probability theory his prophecies are just good guesses when learning the law of near enough where there's room to find meaning in any prophecy, and in psychology people who hear the voice of God, like Paul, are experienced not a supernatural experience but psychotic auditory visual phenomena, where studies show that in real time people that receive messianic revelation are having delusions in the complex partial temporal lobe seizure, where people with mood disorders, psychosis, epilepsy or schizophrenia. Even for the idea of a supernatural afterlife is impossible, and the closest we can get to absolute immortality and afterlife is through naturalistic means, but there are obstacles like the limits of AI, where quantum mechanical limits a machine can do, but with enough progress if we can have superior intelligence that can solve problems faster than we can, where at best people live in simulated universe or digitalized brains, which have been achieved to an extent to worms, and mathematicians discover that we can have absolute immortality despite there always a non-zero probability that it fails, but it found a way to prevent this to achieve immortality by keep increasing redundancies where the probability curve stays low, where infinite live is achieved. Thus this is our best shot for people who want to live eternally, including methods like a complete map of the brain, and because of quantum information can never be destroyed, thus it can be conserved because the universe never have a beginning nor and thus these material energy are eternal, and it can preserve neutrinos, which they stay around even after the end of the universe, and has information, and quantum mechanics ensures conservation of information and time reversal symmetry thanks to the conservation of probability, and all information about me is imprinted in the universe with advanced technology. It can be recovered like quantum computers using black hole energy, and evidence points to a multiverse is infinite energy show achieve humanity oldest goal, absolute immortality. I should clarify, when I said we should be metaskeptic, what I mean is that we should have a balance of pragmatism and skepticism, not going to complete anti-skepticism that some pragmatists propose, but also not embracing extreme/radical/philosophical/academic/external world/universal/solipsist/Descartes skepticism, which is psychologically impossible because the idea that knowledge is impossible, and the mainstream scientific, philosophical, and mathematical community willing to accept good evidence. And taking this thinking, extreme skepticism, to its logical extent becomes self-refuting, making a positive assertion and saying nothing can be no except the statement is special pleading. At best we should support Pyrrhonism because the scientific method use fallibilism and is a continuation of Pyrrhonian skepticism, like religious use memories of their own or others as reliable while in reality is unreliable, and humans have tendency to create false memories for a variety of reasons, and religion/theism prefer to be immune to fallibilism and be ignorant instead of embracing it and be wrong as a result. Problems of extreme skepticism and theistic thinking relies heavily on a priori, but the problem is that a priori can reject empirical evidence and not resting on any evidence and leads to presuppositionalism. Another problem is induction reasoning, meanly you can't use induction to prove induction, but thanks to scientific and philosophical progress that a posterior and abductive reasoning have been superior, not presuming the supernatural, God, afterlife, and etc. And all evidence points to metaphysical/ontological naturalism/atheism, metaethical naturalism, and physicalism. Inductive reasoning tends to suffer confirmation bias. Brain in a vat/Cartesian genius demon contradicts evidence like evolutionary algorithm, stellar nucleosynthesis, crystallization, autocatalysis, computer science, and Occam's razor disprove external workers, including God. Thanks to our scientific progress, the gaps that God/Cartesian demon used to inhabit has gotten smaller over time. We have scientific evidence that evolution, biology, abiogenesis, chemistry, and quantum mechanics, physics, are the answer, not God. Theists using Gödel's incompleteness theorems for God/Cartesian demon as true but unprovable, but the problem is that we must needs to be formalized in the language of mathematical logic, and God is not a well-defined formula, and in fact God is incoherent, contractionary, inconsistent, unintelligible, meaningless, and impossible. And lastly, thanks to science that our understanding by working from the simple to the complex, understanding atoms in terms of elementary particles, and to posit intelligence as the creator and driving force of everything else makes no sense, since it would itself require explanation in terms of simpler underlying entities, thus making God/Cartesian demon metaphysically impossible. And while some who are agnostic are ought to suspend judgment of the issue of God, but thanks to scientific progress shows metaphysical naturalism/atheism to be correct and agnosticism no longer valid, and there are disadvantages to be agnostic, like proving a negative, which science does on a regular basis, like logical truth like 1 + 1 = 2 using a set of axioms, set theory, and proof theory, which becomes agnosticism. Unreasonable to remain agnostic on this, and now we know religions came from thanks of the study of culture and archaeology, thus once and for all disprove God. Started by Homo erectus, discover fire, which may gave birth to the earliest superstition, fire worship, sun worship, animal worship, and supernatural belief in general, and adding meat in their diet increased brain size, which increased intelligence, and evidence of Homo erectus using the earliest example of abstract art using shells, which religious thinking later developed. And Neanderthals continued this tradition, which archaeologists find evidence that they teach us Homo sapiens symbolic thought, possibly speech and proto-religious practice. And 175,000 years ago the Neanderthals built the earliest rituals in caves, which Homo sapiens copied their practice, like the Chowbit cave 30,000 years ago. Neanderthals buried their dead in Israel as far back as 100,000 years ago, coexisting with Homo sapiens and interbreed. Neanderthals also interbreed with Homo erectus, then the oldest race/ethnic group in the history of our species, the Sand people, which has been around for 100,000 years, and they started to have religious thinking 70,000 years ago. And Python cave is the first time to have religious worship 70,000 years ago by the Sand people, who are worshipping snakes, and today the Sand religion believes that their race are descendants of a Python deity. Theism is based on the ignorance of the physical world, and religion is based on fear, where when a doctrine of hell, cruel gods, curses, divine punishment, treating women as the source of all problems, or women as objects like few pagan religions where goddesses were raped, and indoctrinate the young with these abusive ideas, that critical thinking is reduced and thus are prevented to question beliefs in order to avoid punishment. And evidence show that Christianity, all denominations, the dominate religion, and the leading defenders of this faith reject objective-based evidence. Only 20% accept evidentialism, and many will reject evidence and chose to be ignorant. And many leading philosophical theologians of Christianity admits that there is no evidence, and if they adopt the method of historians, archaeologists, scientists, and mathematicians will lead their faith to the sands, that even the leader of today's Christian apologetics, William Lane Craig, said this: reason is a tool to help us better understand our faith. Should faith and reason conflict, it is reason that must submit to faith, not vice versa. And Alvin Plantinga said, the best arguments for the public rationality of Christian belief are not particularly successful. At any rate, they don't show that Christian belief is likely with respect to public evidence. They admit that irrationality and ignorance is the foundation of ism, and these are Christians, a group that accepted science and enlightenment values the most. Imagine now in the Islamic world, where they have not had their own age of enlightenment, scientific revolution, and reformation, where they are proud of their ignorance and will proudly reject science that goes against their text, and these countries where there are laws that atheism can be punishable by death if the two biggest religions were for blind ignorance and positive romanticism instead of skepticism and being open-minded, that theists who are not philosophers, like the grand majority, are anti-evidence. Thus no wonder is so popular theists were the original conspiracy theories before conspiracy theory became their own unique group of paranoid individuals. Despite all this, apologists of all religion/denomination/theism will claim that science comes from their values/text, while in reality the methodology of science we have today was established by natural philosophers in the 2nd century Roman Empire, Ptolemy, Hero, atheist, and Galen, which was adopted by the Byzantine/Islamic empires, who reject supernatural explanations, and science/math that we currently practice was perfected by David Hume, atheist, Ernst Mach, atheist, Bertrand Russell, atheist, Karl Popper, agnostic, W. V. Quine, atheist, Stephen Jay Gould, agnostic, Auguste Comte, atheist, Karl Marx, atheist, Sigmund Freud, atheist, Albert Einstein, agnostic, Alan Turing, atheist, Alfred Tarski, atheist, David Hilbert, atheist or agnostic, John von Neumann, agnostic, John Dewey, atheist, J.J.C. Smart, atheist, Erwin Schrödinger, atheist, Enrico Fermi, agnostic, Edward Teller, agnostic, Paul Erdos, atheist, Pierre Laplace, atheist, Alfred Nobel, atheist, and the same man named after the prize, J. Robert Oppenheimer, atheist, and Paul Dirac, atheist. Theism rejects reason. This is why philosophy should be consistent with scientific discoveries, like in the words of Charles Peirce, that shows the uselessness of Descartes' approach that many theists use to justify God. In science, in which men come to agreement, when a theory has been broached, it is considered to be on probation until this agreement has been reached. After it is reached, the question of certainty becomes an idle one, because there is no one left who doubts it. We individually cannot reasonably hope to attain the ultimate philosophy which we pursue. We can only seek it, therefore, for community of philosophers. Philosophy ought to imitate the successful sciences in its methods, so far as to trust rather to the multitude and variety of its arguments than to the conclusiveness of any one. Its reasoning should not form a chain which is no stronger than its weakest link, but a cable whose fibers may be ever so slender, provided they are sufficiently numerous and intimately connected. Empiricism of Peirce is full of inference, with Wilfrid Seller's complex pragmatist naturalist approach to inquiry, when experience provides raw material for knowledge, but not informed concepts that are non-sensory. Our contact of the external world is through experience, and use language so we can explicitly name and classify in the empirical object language statements we take to be true, and talking about abstract entities like a Platonic God have no explanatory power. Humans invented God, and nature is all there is, all there was, and all that ever will be. The physical world is the ultimate reality, and the progress of science, math, and history, historical method, mathematical logic, archaeological method, and scientific method with a mix of pragmatism, Bayesianism, and Occam's razor, will be taken as the last word to why things are as they are. Like the words of Democritus that nothing exists except atoms and empty space, which he will be eternally correct in the statement nothing exists except neutrinos and cosmic inflation. To understand about the external world objectively, or at least as objective as possible, we must adopt the combination of the archaeological method, historical method, from the revisionist and post-revisionist schools, mathematical logic, proof theory, axiomatic system, and Zermelo, Frankel set theory, scientific method, combination of skepticism, not the extreme kind, pragmatism, methodological naturalism, empiricism, a posterior and abductive reasoning, and combine the scientific method with the null hypothesis and fallibility, but not the orthodox approach to fallibilism, but mix it with Bayesianism, where allows for the fact that modern scientific theories typically make claims far beyond what can be directly observed, and enable us to how this non-empirical evidence fits in, or can be fit in, and like Wilfrid Seller in the dimensions of describing and explaining the world, science is the measure of all things, of what is that it is, and of what is not that it is not. Atheism is true even in a postmodern sense, is true because the meta-narrative of ism of all types is no longer credible. It is no longer possible to be a theist of any kind. By extension, any belief of the supernatural and paranormal. There is no God's eye view. We live in a world of nothing in a sense of extreme postmodern/post-structuralist/nihilist of Jean Baudrillard of hyper-reality PAR excellent, which even the power of hierarchy itself is no longer credible. Introduction. Politics. Anarchists did not try to carry out genocide against the Armenians in Turkey. They did not deliberately starve millions of Ukrainians. They did not create a system of death camps to kill Jews, Gypsies, and Slavs in Europe. They did not firebomb scores of large German and Japanese cities and drop nuclear bombs on 2 of them. They did not carry out a great leap forward that killed scores of millions of Chinese. They did not attempt to kill everybody with any appreciable education in Cambodia. They did not launch one aggressive war after another. They did not implement trade sanctions that killed perhaps 500,000 Iraqi children. In debates between anarchists and statists, the burden of proof clearly should rest on those who place their trust in the state. Anarchy's mayhem is wholly conjectural. The state's mayhem is undeniably, factually horrendous. Robert Higgs. My views on politics can be controversial, but since the Cold War, political movements like neoliberalism, socialism in Latin America, theocracy in the Middle East, and new wave of conservatism in the United States, people express their views more openly regardless if they are radical centrist, conservative, liberal, classical liberal, right-wing libertarian, social democracy, and democratic socialism. Political philosophy and political science is the most important topic that affects our world more than any other, is as important or more important than philosophy of religion, theology, and religious studies, but I already made my perspective on the latter, so I don't be focusing there, only the last part of the book where I go a broad critique. What I be focusing is the politics that I support, and I try to be experimental, and is that I will only have 2 chapters in the entire book. One will be views and political philosophy that I have been resettling, have adopted by the time I'm writing this, and the other is basically me criticizing on what is going on with the world, but I can be wrong and change my political position in the future. I'm no expert, not even a layman. I'm only 20 when I started this, but since 2012 I have been interested and curious on what is going on in the world, and I have to give thanks to figures, documentaries, books, news source, and my personal journey to make this book, and all my reference and bibliography will be in the end of my book, and what I going say is nothing new, thus this book is a mix of other critics and my views of the topic. I don't want to talk about my personal life, but to make this short, I was originally a classical liberal and right-wing libertarian for most of my life, and I was politically illiterate and ignorant, but later when I went to university where politics caught my attention, but years before and after I went to university it chances my views in political science and political philosophy. But slowly over time I started to be focusing what is going on in places like the Middle East, Western Europe, and US and Chinese relations, that I started to become an anarchist, but I was reluctant because on how the mainstream views anarchism and its negative association with it, often interchanging with socialism and communism, often with the brutal era of Stalinist Russia, Maoist China, POTS Cambodia, and during the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s. While I can't deny the horrible atrocities that the Soviets committed, but my views are against authoritarianism and more libertarian approach, and this book will be a short introduction to my views. Chapter 1 of 2, Anarchism. Before we go to the topic, let's play a game. I will make a huge amount of quotes of well-known anarchists. You will guess in what anarchist school of thought I follow. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, your concrete actions are completely unworthy of the ideas you pretend to hold. Is it possible that you do not know what a hostage really is? A man imprisoned not because of a crime he has committed, but only because it suits his enemies to exert blackmail on his companions. If you admit such methods, one can foresee that one day you will use torture, as was done in the Middle Ages. I hope you will not answer me that power is for political men a professional duty, and that any attack against that power must be considered as a threat against which one must guard oneself at any price. This opinion is no longer held even by kings. Are you so blinded, so much a prisoner of your own authoritarian ideas, that you do not realize that being at the head of European communism, you have no right to soil the ideas which you defend by shameful methods? What future lies in store for communism when one of its most important defenders tramples in this way every honest feeling? Peter Alexeyevich Kropotkin. We too aspire to communism as the most perfect achievement of human solidarity, but it must be anarchist communism, that is, freely desired and accepted, and the means by which the freedom of everyone is guaranteed and can expand. For these reasons we maintain that state communism, which is authoritarian and imposed, is the most hateful tyranny that has ever afflicted, tormented, and handicapped mankind. Enrico Malatesta. Communism made through the will of a government instead of through the direct and voluntary work of groups of workers does not really appeal to me. If it was possible, it would be the most suffocating tyranny to which human society has ever been subjected. Enrico Malatesta. What we want is not a redistribution of overcoats, although it must be said that even in such a case, the shivering folk would see advantage in it. Nor do we want to divide up the wealth of the Rothschilds. What we do want is so to arrange things that every human being born into the world shall be ensured the opportunity, in the first instance of learning some useful occupation, and of becoming skilled in it, and next, that he shall be free to work at his trade without asking leave of master or owner, and without handing over to landlord or capitalist the lion's share of what he produces. Fyodor Kropotkin. If you took the most ardent revolutionary, vested him in absolute power, within a year he would be worse than the Tsar himself. Mikhail Bakunin. We are convinced that liberty without socialism is privilege, injustice, and that socialism without liberty is slavery and brutality. Mikhail Bakunin. Meanwhile, two other great currents in political thought had a decisive significance on the development of socialist ideas: liberalism, which had powerfully stimulated advanced minds in the Anglo-Saxon countries, Holland and Spain in particular, and democracy in the sense to which Rousseau gave expression in his social contract, and which found its most influential representatives in the leaders of French Jacobinism. While liberalism in its social theory started off from the individual and wished to limit the state's activities to a minimum, democracy took its stand on an abstract collective concept, Rousseau's general will, which it sought to fix in the national state. Liberalism and democracy were preeminently political concepts, and since most of the original adherents of both did scarcely consider the economic conditions of society, the further development of these conditions could not be practically reconciled with the original principles of democracy, and still less with those of liberalism. Democracy with its motto of equality of all citizens before the law, and liberalism with its right of man over his own person, both were wrecked on the realities of capitalist economy. As long as millions of human beings in every country have to sell their labor to a small minority of owners, and sink into the most wretched misery if they can find no buyers, the so-called equality before the law remains merely a pious fraud, since the laws are made by those who find themselves in possession of the social wealth. But in the same way there can be no talk of a right over one's own person, for that right ends when one is compelled to submit to the economic dictation of another if one does not want to starve. Rudolf Rocker. It was the first time that I had ever been in a town where the working class was in the saddle. Practically every building of any size had been seized by the workers and was draped with red flags and with the red and black flag of the anarchists. Every wall was scrawled with the hammer and sickle and with the initials of the revolutionary parties. Almost every church had been gutted and its images burned. Churches here and there were being systematically demolished by gangs of workmen. Every shop and cafe had an inscription saying that it had been collectivized. Even the bootblacks had been collectivized and their boxes painted red and black. Waiters and shop walkers looked you in the face and treated you as an equal. Servile and even ceremonial forms of speech had temporarily disappeared. Nobody said señor or don or even usted. Everyone called everyone else comrade or thou, and said salute, instead of buenos dias. Tipping had been forbidden by law since the time of Primo de Rivera. Almost my first experience was receiving a lecture from a hotel manager for trying to tip a lift boy. There were no private motor cars, they had all been commandeered, and the trams and taxis and much of the other transport were painted red and black. The revolutionary posters were everywhere, flaming from the walls in clean reds and blues that made the few remaining advertisements look like daubs of mud. Down the Ramblas, the wide central artery of the town where crowds of people streamed constantly to and from, the loudspeakers were bellowing revolutionary songs all day and far into the night. And it was the aspect of the crowds that was the queerest thing of all. In outward appearance it was a town in which the wealthy classes had practically ceased to exist. Except for a small number of women and foreigners there were no well-dressed people at all. Practically everyone wore rough working-class clothes, or blue overalls or some variant of militia uniform. All this was queer and moving. There was much in this that I did not understand, in some ways I did not even like it, but I recognized it immediately as a state of affairs worth fighting for, so far as one could judge the people were contented and hopeful. There was no unemployment, and the price of living was still extremely low, you saw very few conspicuously destitute people, and no beggars except the gypsies. Above all, there was a belief in the revolution and the future, a feeling of having suddenly emerged into an era of equality and freedom. Human beings were trying to behave as human beings and not as cogs in the capitalist machine. George Orwell. With the development of industrial capitalism, a new and unanticipated system of injustice, it is libertarian socialism that has preserved and extended the radical humanist message of the Enlightenment and the classical liberal ideals that were perverted into an ideology to sustain the emerging social order. Noam Chomsky. I am a convinced advocate of economic and social equality because I know that, without it, liberty, justice, human dignity, morality, and the well-being of individuals, as well as the prosperity of nations, will never amount to more than a pack of lies. But since I stand for liberty as the primary condition of mankind, I believe that equality must be established in the world by the spontaneous organization of labor and the collective ownership of property by freely organized producers' associations, and by the equally spontaneous federation of communes, to replace the domineering paternalistic state. Mikhail Bakunin. In fact, I should say to begin with that the term anarchism is quite a range of political ideas, but I would prefer to think of it as a libertarian left, and from that point of view anarchism can be conceived as a kind of voluntary socialism, that is, as libertarian socialist or anarcho-syndicalist or communist anarchist, in the tradition of say Bakunin and Kropotkin and others. They had in mind a highly organized form of society, but a society that was organized on the basis of organic units, organic communities. And generally they meant by that the workplace and the neighborhood, and from those two basic units there could derive through federal arrangements a highly integrated kind of social organization, which might be national or even international in scope. And the decisions could be made over a substantial range, but by delegates who are always part of the organic community from which they come, to which they return and in which, in fact, they live. Noam Chomsky. A good example of a really large-scale anarchist revolution, in fact the best example to my knowledge, is the Spanish Revolution in 1936, in which over most of Republican Spain there was a quite inspiring anarchist revolution that involved both industry and agriculture over substantial areas, developed in a way which to the outside looks spontaneous. Though in fact if you look at the roots of it, you discover that it was based on some 3 generations of experiment and thought and work which extended anarchist ideas to very large parts of the population in this largely pre-industrial though not totally pre-industrial society. And that again was, by both human measures and indeed anyone's economic measures, quite successful. That is, production continued effectively, workers in farms and factories proved quite capable of managing their affairs without coercion from above, contrary to what lots of socialists, communists, liberals, and others wanted to believe, and in fact you can't tell what would have happened. That anarchist revolution was simply destroyed by force, but during the period in which it was alive I think it was a highly successful and, as I say, in many ways a very inspiring testimony to the ability of poor working people to organize and manage their own affairs, extremely successfully, without coercion and control. How relevant the Spanish experience is to an advanced industrial society? One might question in detail. Noam Chomsky. Man, don't these precedents suggest that there is something inherently pre-industrial about the applicability of libertarian ideas, that they necessarily presuppose a rather rural society in which technology and production are fairly simple, and in which the economic organization tends to be small-scale and localized? Well, let me separate that into 2 questions. 1, how anarchists have felt about it, and 2, what I think is the case. As far as anarchist reactions are concerned, there are 2. There has been one anarchist tradition, and one might think, say, of Kropotkin as a representative which had much of the character you describe. On the other hand, there's another anarchist tradition that develops into anarcho-syndicalism which simply regarded anarchist ideas as the proper mode of organization for a highly complex advanced industrial society. And that tendency in anarchism merges, or at least interrelates very closely with a variety of left-wing Marxism, the kind that one finds in, say, the council communists that grew up in the Luxembourgian tradition, and that is later represented by Marxist theorists like Anton Pannekoek, who developed a whole theory of workers' councils in industry and who is himself a scientist and astronomer, very much part of the industrial world. So which of these 2 views is correct? I mean, is it necessary that anarchist concepts belong to the pre-industrial phase of human society, or is anarchism the rational mode of organization for a highly advanced industrial society? Well, I myself believe the latter. That is, I think that industrialization and the advance of technology raise possibilities for self-management over a broad scale that simply didn't exist exist in an earlier period. And that in fact this is precisely the rational mode for an advanced and complex industrial society, one in which workers can very well become masters of their own immediate affairs, that is, in direction and control of the shop, but also can be in a position to make the major substantive decisions concerning the structure of the economy, concerning social institutions, concerning planning regionally and beyond. At present, institutions do not permit them to have control over the requisite information and the relevant training to understand these matters. A good deal could be automated. Much of the necessary work that is required to keep a decent level of social life going can be consigned to machines, at least in principle, which means humans can be free to undertake the kind of creative work which may not have been possible, objectively, in the early stages of the Industrial Revolution. Noam Chomsky. If voting changed anything, they would make it illegal. Emma Goldman. Anarchism is not, as some may suppose, a theory of the future to be realized through divine inspiration. It is a living force in the affairs of our life, constantly creating new conditions. The methods of anarchism therefore do not comprise an ironclad program to be carried out under all circumstances. Methods must grow out of the economic needs of each place and clime, and of the intellectual and temperamental requirements of the individual. Emma Goldman. Murder is a crime, unless it was done by a policeman. The Clash. Now is the time in which, when the one from below asks why he is being attacked, the answer from the one above is, for being who you are it's because in this world in which we feel pain, the criminal is free and the just are in prison. The killer is rewarded and the dead are slandered. But we also see and hear that there are more and more voices all the time that don't trust those above, that don't let themselves be manipulated and that rebel. Those above have no trustworthy word, no honor, no shame, and no dignity. Truth and justice will never, ever, come from above. From the mountains of the Mexican Southeast, Subcommandant Insurgent Moises and Subcommandant Insurgent Galeano, Mexico, August 2015. Used to fuck with Karl Marx till I met Emma Goldman. My homie Robbie Zucca put me up on game. I know why communism always fails. Because a power-hungry communist is just as dangerous as a blood-sucking capitalist. From gulags to the prison industrial complex. To each his own, no thrones, no preachers spreading fantasies. God is a myth and man's enslavement is his reality. God don't like ugly, God hates itself. God hates flags, God hates cops. God is a mass-murdering sociopath. I don't need it to be moral. All I need is a library card and a feeling in my gut that says no man is above me. Next time you fucking use a birth control pill, thank Emma. And the IWW for 8-hour workdays and general strikes. Before kings stole the land from the peasants, we have the commons. Private property is a system used to dispossess people from their needs. That's why poverty is pandemic and capitalism can't eliminate crime. Ain't nothing fair in debt, slavery, and bribes. Emma Goldman. I know I'm no Emma Goldman.